welcome to Tech Via Arn. You are watching the review of the iPhone 8 in 2022. This phone came out in 2017, so by this September, this phone will be 5 years old. This leaves a few questions for buyers who are looking to buy this phone this year, like how is the battery life holding up, is the performance still top-notch? That is exactly what I'm going to be discussing in today's video. So without further ado, let's get into it. First up is the design. If I have to choose one word to describe this design, the word would be boring. As we all know that Apple does not like to change the design in the build-up of the iPhone, like to carry the same design for quite a few years. This front design, and partly this back design as well, has been carrying on since the iPhone 6, which came out in 2014, 3 years before this phone came out. And before this phone, I actually used to own an iPhone 6, so this design has kind of dragged on me. At least they decided to change it from the X, which also came out in 2017, right after this phone. But apart from this, there isn't much to complain about it. It's nice and compact for people who don't like big phones. This form factor is going to work great for them. It fits easily in people's hands with various hand sizes. It's okay. Once you start using it, you'll get used to it. If you're gonna put on a case on it, it won't even matter how the design is. The only other thing that it is a downside is these bezels up the front, especially when compared to today's standards. I'm not gonna lie, they are pretty ugly. But again, it'll grow on you, and at least Touch ID is still here. And at this point, after so many generations, it is super fast. So if you're looking for a phone with a modern or a futuristic design, this phone might let you down. But if you don't care, or you prefer a small and compact phone, this design is just fine for you. Next is the display. This display has a resolution of less than 180p. But since the screen size is so small, sitting at just 4.7 inches, you probably won't be able to tell unless you're very specific. This display doesn't have a high refresh rate, which almost every flagship does today, even iPhones. But again, unless you're very specific about it, a lot of people might not even tell the difference. What I'm trying to say is that the display in no means is a top-end one. In fact, according to today's standards, it's pretty low quality. But if you're not looking or nitpicking for those things, the display would work just fine for you. Factor that you will probably notice is the brightness, which maxes out at just 625 nits and slightly makes it hard to view outdoors even at max brightness. So it could have been better, as this is quite an essential and basic thing for a display to have. But in the end, the display is in no means a bad one, but doesn't have the high specifications flagships nowadays have, such as high resolution and higher refresh rate. The performance. This phone has Apple's A11 processor, and if you've been following closely with smartphones over the last couple of years, you will know that Apple's chips are the fastest compared to any other smartphone chips present now. Whether it's the Geekbench scores or the speed tests, in the last few years, Apple's chips have destroyed its counterparts, whether it's Snapdragon or Exynos. But to backtrack a bit, the A11 processor in the iPhone 8 is very smooth. It's snappy. I don't think in my use this phone has crashed or significantly slowed down during extensive use or heavy tasks. Maybe a little when it comes to gaming. The only real downside of this phone is that it only has 2 gigs of RAM. So I have noticed the apps refreshing quite quickly and kind of removes the possibility of a lot of multitasking on this device. Also, I'm not sure if this is a thing with my device specifically or not, but the phone tends to heat up quite a lot, even if I'm doing basic things like web browsing. But it doesn't necessarily cause any issues with the performance of the phone. Just something I wanted to note. Overall, the performance of the phone is still great, especially considering it's almost 5 years old in 2022. The only thing that would have made it better is extra RAM. The battery. The iPhone 8 has a 1821 mAh battery capacity. To be perfectly honest, it's not the best. I've had to charge it at least once before the end of the day, even if I start off with 100%, getting on average roughly around 3 to 4 hours of screen on time. And my use mainly consists of web browsing, maybe playing a game here or there, YouTube and social media. So not very extensive, but I would say a good mixture. Considering that, I would say this is most probably the weakest point of this phone. Especially when you compare to now, where even budget phones have cells as big as 4,000 to 5,000 mAh. And charging is also not helpful, as it only comes with a 5-watt charger, which takes well around 2 hours to charge to 100%. It is capable of fast charging, but you would have to purchase an additional adapter, that also only goes up to 18 watts. The only upside of the battery is that wireless charging is present, but again, that also won't be that fast either. And the battery health of my phone isn't a significant factor when I make this judgment, as it sits at 89%. Of course, if you're a light user and tend not to spend a lot of time on your phone, the battery shouldn't be a major problem. For power users, this battery is quite lacking, especially for people who like to play a lot of games on their phone, or for people who use their phone as a significant part of their work. And finally, the cameras. It's safe to say that the iPhone 8's rear camera is really future-proof. It doesn't have a lot of downsides. This camera can produce some very good photos. The overall quality of them is great, the colors are pretty great as well, and so is the HDR. It does tend to struggle with harsh conditions such as low light or extreme close-ups, but otherwise the photos that come out of this phone are very good. And even the video from the rear is in no way disappointing. It's actually really great. The phone can record up to 4K 60fps video from the rear camera. Maybe it could work on things such as nighttime video or better OIS, otherwise I don't have major complaints from the video segment of the camera. However, when it comes to the selfie camera, things are disappointing. The selfie camera, which has a very low resolution of 7 megapixel, and whether it's photos or videos, it's subpar. If the conditions are good, you can get some okay shots, but if the conditions are difficult for the camera, even a very tiny amount, the quality is going to drop straight down. And this is how the mic sounds on a pretty windy day. I would say it's pretty okay. If you would like a more detailed analysis of the phone's camera, both rear and front, you can head to my previous video where I test everything from photos to videos in every aspect in detail. In the end, I would say the phone's rear camera is still very good and would not disappoint you in most cases, but the selfie camera isn't really useful apart from general or ordinary things like video calls. In conclusion, the iPhone 8 is still worth getting. You could roughly get it for $200 to $300 refurbished on places such as eBay, and I would say that's a fair price for what you're getting here. This phone has a bunch of features that make it future-proof. It has a 12 megapixel camera that can shoot up to 4K 60fps video. It has wireless charging. The performance is still top-notch. And on top of that, it should still receive new versions of the iOS for at least 2 more years, and security updates a few years after that. The only big downside of the phone is the battery life. The design and the display also aren't the best, but if you're not a tech geek, this shouldn't be a big problem for you. And there's my review of the iPhone 8. I hope you found it useful, and if you did, please don't forget to like and also leave feedback for what I can improve on for next time. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you the next time.